Look, I need you watching our backs. You're a better shot than I am.
Huh, really?
No?
Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Gears of War 4 Insane Difficulty video walkthrough. This is Act 5, Chapter 3, Gatecrashers, and we're in a massive robot, which is always fun. But the power fantasy here is a little bit neutered, because you can die. And I know, shock horror, on Insane Difficulty you can die. Well, most things here aren't going to do too much damage to you, for the most, but if a carrier releases all of its nemesis and they hit you, you will just detonate. It's a death sentence, for lack of a better word. So I recommend that you play very passive against certain enemies, but with everything else you can be as aggressive as you want. You'll notice we're using an industrial stapler, which I think is amazing, and I love this weapon. I love how the front of it rotates before it fires. I'm a massive fan of animations on weapons before they do things, and not necessarily slowing down the weapon's shot or its ability to feel responsive, but just give me some visual flair when it does things, and that's what this weapon does. I think it's beautiful design-wise. I wish there was a smaller version so you could use it as your team. But right now there is a carrier at the end of this road, and the reason why I'm being so tentative is because it killed me, and that's a problem in my opinion on the power fantasy levels of a game. You know, you're in a giant robot, it's meant to edify the character, it's the final act, it's moving towards the epic conclusion, we've had the darkest hour, we've had that low moment, and now we're rising up, and boom, instant death. It really does put a dampener on your delusions of grandeur, but alas, there it is. But it did do one thing, this section, which I really commend it. You see the damage, by the way? That was only like 2 of the cysts. That motherfucker fires like 4 to 6, so do not get touched by them. And your partner can help you here. You can also stand behind your partner, which is interesting. But this sequence reminded me of something I didn't know, so I'm not too sure how I can be reminded of it, but there you go. Now, it showed me that I wanted something I didn't realise I wanted, and that is third-person shooter at this scale. So there are moments where you get to take cover as this robot, and everything is kind of on a planetary scale, and I love the idea of that. I think it could be done really, really interesting with some great gameplay. You just have to make it a little quicker, because of course the emphasis here is slightly slower because we're giant robots, but at the same time, just because you make something methodical doesn't mean it has to be really slow. And I think it could work super well. It just has to be designed around it. And the idea of that kind of scale changes what the geometry means. It turns a small building or a church into a potential stepladder or piece of cover. You know, it changes everything and how you look at it. And I like the idea of that. And it could be done and taken really far. You could take it and run with it and come up with something cool. And I think they do a good job with this. I particularly like the Predator shoulder cannon, where you can paint targets and fire off missiles from the helicopter. My only criticism of that particular technique is it can be difficult to judge the depth of the laser, because it isn't just a stationary laser, it's a laser that moves. So it can be hard to tell where you're painting. You're like painting with the centre of the screen and your impression of it, rather than a definitive targeting system like a reticle, which I think that laser could have been like a reticle that didn't move. It doesn't have to get smaller the further away it is or anything like that, but it chose to do it that way, so you've got to adjust. But I really like this sequence, and I think they've put it in here mainly for it to be a little bit of diversity, as we get hit by the quill there from a snatcher that does incredible damage and I hide behind a house. But they've given us a taste of destruction, they've given us a taste of power, and they're setting up the premise for the boss fight, because we're going to be fighting the final boss in this mech, and there are a few things you need to know about this particular robot. He can go into cover, he can sprint, and he can roll, but his roll is kind of a jet-boosted dodge. And you're going to be using that to dodge the final boss's attacks. And I know what you're thinking, did you just say dodging attacks in Gears of War? And I did, sir, I did indeed. And it's a cool idea, once again. It brings me to a point which I wish more games would do, which is giving the player control over the outcome in these games. My favourite genre of game, or one of my favourite genres, because it does flip around a little bit, is the character action games, because everything that happens in that game is 100% dictated by your character, because you can control almost all of it. If there's something you do not like, dodge it. If there's something you cannot dodge, counter it. so on and so forth. Everything in that is an opening, everything is potential damage, everything can be used as a weakness if you understand how the game works. And that's what I want third-person shooters to move towards. I want there to have a level of mastery and expertise that doesn't require patience and chest-high wall regeneration. Like, I think the games could add so many features to them, and the only game that's even remotely risked any of this kind of stuff was Vanquish. And I like Vanquish a lot, but you can only play it so much, and it's, you know, it's one of those games that has got a lot of great ideas to it, but it's also very standard in a lot of ways. But it gives you a dodge that has iframes, so it enables you to do well-timed, crazy maneuvers. It makes your character really, really mobile, and I would love to see this become a feature. Just the idea that you can manipulate scenarios, and it's same with first-person shooters. I think we've got to the point in gaming where we seem to assume that we know what they're meant to be, rather than what if this, what if that. So we get these very standard, very well-worn paths of similar gameplay. You don't have this cross-pollination of ideas as much as it used to happen, and I don't know why. I would love to have, you know, precise, rewarding mechanics in games that are known for sitting in cover and popping up every so often just to put a few bullets on an enemy that dies when you do that 5 times, and then you skid into the next piece of cover and do it to the next guy. Like this right now. This is a Brumac. In this game we call them Swarmacs because, you know, whatever. So this is utilising the cover feature of the robot, and it's a really interesting thing. But all we're doing is shooting at this enemy. That's it. There's no elegance to this, there's nothing interesting here. We're just shooting a Brumac, and we've done this a million times. The Brumac has missiles that lock in and home on. They could have turned this into all kinds of craziness. You could have got close and meleeed this dude. They could have turned it into Mystical Ninja Gorman. You know, the super robot from that with the roller skates. It could have even had melee combat, and you might be thinking, wow, Chris, don't get too carried away. But the final boss has melee combat. So why not introduce it here and introduce us to the notion of how it works and give us a tool? Like, the melee combat later on lets you block. Can you imagine if you were able to dodge and block and hit and swing back and get hit stun and knock enemies away? And they could have turned this into a really crazy moment of Gears of War, where everyone's thinking, wow, this is not like Gears, this is like God of War. So finally the confusion between the acronyms makes more sense. But it's just, they get ideas and then they never do anything with them, and it really seems strange. Like those missiles, they could have made it so the spread on them was a lot tighter, so you had to do the dodge to get away from them, and you had to wait for them to get close and then press left and A, and you would dodge out of the way of the missiles. And not only is that teaching you that you can precisely dodge and it's skillful, but then when you get to the final boss and it wants you to do that, it doesn't feel so weird. But instead we'll do God of War and rip this dude's mouth open without any of the fun melee combat. And it's like, this is a great idea, guys, and I'm not knocking it. I just, make it more. Make us able to pick up a fucking tree, dude. I want to smack a Brumac with a conifer. There's so much stuff here. Let me drop buildings on people. Let me push buildings over. You know, just add to this awesomeness. There's so much they could have done, and I can't help but feel like we make things pretty, and then we rest on our laurels because we know the gameplay is easy because everyone's expecting a bloody, you know, what is it, 1 meter high wall simulator, and that's it. Like, there's more to games than what we're doing right now. But all the people who made those incredible games and who had those strong voices don't seem to be speaking up, and the new generation of devs seem to be doing the stuff we've always kind of done. Like, why can't you pick a car up and then aim and then kick the car at stuff? That'd be cool. You can kick the cars, it just does a really flaccid parabolic bulge, that's it. You don't kick it and it embeds itself in a mountain and makes you feel like a beast. Like, why can't I grab the helicopter and go into melee mode with the rotor blades, and then once I'm done in melee mode I let the helicopter free and they do some kind of witty, you crazy bastard kind of thing. Thanks for nearly getting us killed. You know, it's... Remember the sequence with the loader, how we could push stuff? Imagine if you could change the geometry of the terrain by pushing stuff. Causing natural disasters, anything, man. Ah, it could be so cool. Where's the weather in this mode? Imagine a wind flare coming in when you're huge. Riding the lightning, literally. It could... Oh, I'm going to give over. But anyway, you get what I mean, guys. This is a really fun section, but it's lazy. And that's what I feel a lot about Gears of War 4. I think it's a fun game. Look at that, dude. I just went into cover as a massive robot. It's cool. Use it. You know, don't just have this little fucking popcorn sequence at the end. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm getting old and cynical, but... There was so much they could have done with this, and it's so wonderfully safe, you know? It's the biggest criticisms you can give Halo 4 and 5. They're so fucking safe. You know, they make my fillings ache. Because there's just no balls at all to them. There's no risk. There's no trying something new. Like, can you imagine if half the campaign was the Locust side of it, and half the campaign was the COG side of it, and we actually got to humanize with the Locust and understand their perspective and see a completely different aspect of life on Serra? Like, one thing games since Breath of Fire... Remember Breath of Fire, where they let you play as the villain, and it really gave you an insight into the villain, and you were just like, wow, this guy's cool, and it turned out he's the guy you hunt for the rest of the game, and you got a bit conflicted, because you liked how powerful he was, and you thought he was mysterious. That's how you make your antagonist interesting. You give the players something. And no games really do this. Recently, the most recent one that I saw that did it was Quantum Break, and I thought you were going to get to play as that Dirty Fingers, or whatever he's called from Game of Thrones. But all you did was make those decisions. You didn't play as him, you didn't have levels as him, you could have had completely different gameplay as that guy, and given yourself diversity without needing for it to be these arbitrary, stupid moments. But they didn't utilise it correctly, but they still gave you an insight, and they reminded audiences that, remember when you played as villains, and it gave you different sides of the story, and it mixed gameplay up? That's a cool idea. It can be a terrible idea, when one gameplay is better than the other, so all you do is hold your breath until you're playing as the other character, i.e. Rachel in Ninja Gaiden, but still, you know, it's a risk, it's different, it's adding to things, and this game seems to be so in love with telling a story that's already been fucking told. So why not just go nuts? Why not go risky? It seems simple to me. It really does. Like, why not let us play as that dude who looks a bit like Ram, with one arm? See his campaign, see what he was doing, but instead they'll sell it to us in DLC that lasts 4 hours and nobody likes. But, you know, I don't know shit. But here's another Swarmac. You'll notice that I boosted immediately to get to the other side of this guy. I did this because my teammate kept getting in the way, and I was getting really frustrated with her. And all we're going to do here is pretty simple stuff. We're going to be chaining the missiles and shooting the blisters. I don't know, I feel like the blisters are just really disingenuous. They look like a weak spot because they look like every weak spot ever designed on a post-Xbox 360 console, because for whatever reason developers are obsessed with the notion that if anything is weak on a human or on a creature or any kind of organic matter, it has to swell up like a pustule and be full of like magma for some reason. It has to glow like it's been heated in a fire, and I'll never understand this. And I was on a video the other day that was talking about the blisters on the Brumac, and somebody said the same thing, like they're really sick of weak spots being just glowing yellow bits on bosses. Why is it like this? Why don't we do new things? And then somebody below him essentially solidified why this technique exists, because they said, well, why would you know what was a weak spot? How would you know what the weak spot was? How would you know what to shoot? And immediately that tells me that that person's never played a game previous to 2000, because he never played games where they didn't tell you what to shoot, you just figured it out. And it's that notion, isn't it, of we're now in a generation of people that can't remember when games asked you to do things, rather than telling you to do things. Like, it's amazing how different games are now. Like, Just Then's a fantastic example. In previous games, on a previous generation, there wouldn't have been a massive thing in the HUD telling me that he could be executed. There wasn't a giant Y telling me to go up to him and press Y. You had to fucking do that. You had to figure that out. And in some ways, I think it's got a lot better for it, but just because somebody did this and chose to make the mechanic work that way doesn't mean we have to get rid of the discovery, doesn't mean everybody has to do it. Or it just turns into that Ubisoft thing where every game has the same AI, every game looks the same, and it just looks like this weird, you know, copy-paste Ubisoft bullshit that actually undercuts the value of the game because it just feels like they're all made by the same person, just with different goals. But thank you for watching, guys. I will see you in the finale. You take care now.